All right, so today we're going deep on something a little bit different.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at the intersection of politics, religion, and national identity.
Sounds good.
Our source material is an interview with Archbishop Duncan Williams
Okay.
on Ghanaian TV. And let me tell you, this is a thought-provoking one.
I can imagine.
He is tackling the question of whether spiritual forces can influence a nation's fate.
Interesting.
And his answer is a resounding yes.
Wow.
He even uses this really striking term,
Okay.
the Prince of Ghana, to describe a malevolent force he believes is holding the country back.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
It's not just that Ghana faces challenges, but there's this entity, this prince,
Yeah.
actively working against its progress.
Yeah.
And this idea of a malevolent force ties into a concept some Christians believe in called
Right.
territorial spirits.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
What exactly are territorial spirits, and is
There you
this
go.
something we see in other cultures or belief systems?
You're absolutely right. This isn't unique to Ghana.
Okay.
The idea of territorial spirits, these powerful entities that can influence specific geographic areas, shows up in various forms across cultures and throughout history. Think about ancient mythology with its gods and goddesses tied to certain lands.
Right.
Or even the concept of genius loci, the protective spirit of a place in Roman religion.
Right.
It's a way of explaining events, both good and bad, by attributing them to these unseen forces.
Okay, so how might this belief in a Prince of Ghana resonate with Ghanaians today?
Well, imagine living in a country with so much potential,
Yeah.
but facing persistent economic and social issues.
Yeah.
The idea of a Prince of Ghana could provide an explanation for hardship.
Right.
It could also offer a sense of hope. If this prince is the source of the problems, then maybe overcoming this spiritual force is the key to unlocking Ghana's potential.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But it also raises some questions for me.
Sure.
Is the Archbishop speaking literally in? Or could this Prince of Ghana be a metaphor for something else? Perhaps for the complex systemic issues that are harder to tackle.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something we, the listeners, might want to consider.
Yeah.
Is this a literal belief, a metaphor, or maybe even a bit of both?
Yeah.
And what are the implications of each interpretation?
Exactly, because the Archbishop doesn't stop at identifying the problem.
Right.
He offers a solution,
Okay.
and it's a pretty bold one.
Right.
He calls for national prayer and spiritual warfare,
Wow.
saying that political solutions alone won't be enough.
And what's particularly interesting is his claim that it will take a generation who have directly experienced God's power to break this spiritual hold.
Oh, wow.
He's talking about a profound shift in mindset, a spiritual awakening that he believes is necessary for national change.
He even recounts a story about former President Rawlings leading a national prayer event. But he seems disappointed it didn't lead to lasting change. He suggests that presidents need to be actively engaged in spiritual warfare for their policies to truly succeed.
Now, this raises an intriguing question about leadership.
Right.
The Archbishop seems to be suggesting that political authority alone isn't enough.
Right.
True leadership, in his view, requires spiritual authority as well. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So
Yeah.
it's fascinating how he intertwines these spiritual beliefs
Yeah.
with the realities of governing a nation.
Right.
He doesn't just call for any prayer, though.
Right.
He's talking about a very specific kind of prayer,
Okay.
a strategic approach to spiritual warfare.
Interesting.
He even uses this analogy of a veil cast over Ghana, a veil of confusion and deception
Okay.
that's preventing progress.
It's a vivid image, isn't it? This
Yeah.
veil that's obscuring truth, hindering clear thinking, and keeping the nation trapped.
Right.
And it connects back to the idea of the Prince of Ghana we talked about earlier. The Archbishop seems to believe this entity is actively working to maintain this veil to keep Ghana from reaching its full potential.
Yeah, he's not just saying we need to pray this veil away.
Right.
He's calling for something more active, more intentional.
Okay.
He's talking about binding and casting out these negative spiritual entities,
Okay.
almost like a direct confrontation.
Yes. And that's where the idea of spiritual warfare comes in.
Right.
It's not just about passive prayer. It's about taking a proactive stance against these unseen forces.
Right.
It raises the question, though,
Yeah.
of how much agency individuals actually have in this spiritual battle. Are leaders simply pawns in this cosmic game?
Right.
Or do they have the power to choose to resist?
That's a really good question.
It is a big one.
And it's interesting because the Archbishop seems to believe that leaders do have a choice.
Okay.
He talks about advising former President Rawlings,
Okay.
telling him that if he stood for God, God would stand for him.
This glimpse into his interactions with political leaders suggests that he sees himself as more than just a spiritual leader.
Yeah.
He's almost acting as a guide,
Right.
a counselor to those in positions of power.
Right.
And his recounting of the story about President Rawlings leading a national prayer event, but not seeing the lasting change he'd hoped for, adds another layer to this.
It suggests that this spiritual battle isn't a one-time event, a single victory won.
Right.
It's an ongoing struggle, a constant need for vigilance and engagement.
Yeah.
And if it's an ongoing struggle, who does he think should be leading the charge?
Well, the Archbishop seems to believe that each generation needs to actively engage in this spiritual warfare to claim their own victories.
Right.
He specifically calls for a new generation of leaders who understand the nature of this spiritual struggle and who are equipped to lead the nation to true freedom and prosperity.
Oh.
He's essentially calling for a spiritual renewal movement.
He doesn't shy away from the challenges involved, though.
Right.
He acknowledges the existence of people he calls loyalists, who surround leaders, people who may not have the nation's best interests at heart.
Yeah.
He even goes as far as to call them evil.
Wow.
Suggesting they can hinder progress and manipulate situations for their own gain.
Those are strong words.
They are.
And they highlight just how seriously he takes this spiritual battle.
Yeah.
But this also brings up the question of discernment. How do you recognize those who are genuinely working for the good of the nation versus those who are driven by self-interest or, as he suggests, even darker motivations?
It's a chilling thought to consider. That there might be forces seen or unseen working against the prosperity of an entire nation.
Right.
He even goes on to compare Ghana to other nations throughout history, implying that this type of spiritual struggle is universal, that every country has faced this need to confront and overcome unseen forces that hinder their progress.
It's a reminder that the challenges Ghana faces aren't unique. Nations throughout history have grappled with these kinds of struggles.
That's right.
And it's fascinating how he brings this global perspective into the conversation.
And then, in a truly dramatic moment, he leads the viewers in a powerful prayer.
Wow.
Right there on live television.
Okay.
He's invoking the name of Jesus, claiming authority over this Prince of Ghana, and directly asking for God's intervention in the affairs of the nation. It's a powerful testament to his faith and his belief in the power of prayer to effect change.
It's also a powerful example of how ritual and emotional expression can solidify beliefs and create a sense of shared identity.
Right.
Experiences like this, especially when shared collectively, can be incredibly potent.
He's not just praying for vague spiritual blessings either.
Right.
He's praying for specific things.
Okay.
For the lifting of this veil of deception.
Right.
For wisdom and discernment, for leaders, for unity among the people, and for the flourishing of the nation as a whole.
Okay.
It's a very comprehensive prayer touching on economic, social, and political issues.
It reflects a worldview where the spiritual and the material are deeply interconnected.
Right.
For him, true progress requires addressing both of these dimensions.
Okay, so we've been exploring some pretty heavy concepts here, you know?
Yeah.
Spiritual warfare, national destinies, the power of belief.
Big topics for sure.
But I'm curious.
Yeah.
What does the Archbishop actually propose we do about all of this?
You're right. He doesn't just leave us with a diagnosis.
Right.
He actually offers some pretty specific solutions, a blueprint for what he sees as national transformation.
Oh, interesting.
And it's not all about spiritual warfare.
Okay.
He also emphasizes practical steps, like the importance of leaders creating jobs, fostering economic growth, and meeting the basic needs of citizens.
So it's not just about prayer and spiritual battles.
Absolutely not.
There's a real-world practical element to his vision as well.
Absolutely. He sees those two things as being deeply intertwined. He calls for this balance of spiritual and practical wisdom, addressing both the spiritual and material needs of the people.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, you can pray all you want, but if people are struggling to survive, true progress will remain elusive.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So where does prayer fit into all of this?
Well,
He's obviously a big believer in its power.
yes, and he specifically emphasizes the need for corporate prayer, for the entire nation to come together in unity and seek God's intervention.
Okay.
He believes that when people pray together, Their collective faith is amplified, creating a spiritual force strong enough to break the hold of this negative entity. He sees unity as a key weapon in this spiritual battle.
It's interesting that he stresses the importance of unity, especially given his earlier comments about those he called loyalists.
Right.
It's like he's acknowledging that there are divisions within the nation that need to be overcome.
You're picking up on a really important point there. He's not just talking about spiritual warfare against some unseen force. He's also talking about the need for unity and reconciliation within Ghanaian society itself.
Right.
He sees division and strife as playing right into the hands of this Prince of Ghana, weakening the nation and making it more susceptible to negative influences.
So there's this personal, internal aspect to his plan as well.
Yes.
It's not just about fighting an external spiritual enemy, but also about addressing internal divisions and working towards a more unified society.
Exactly. He calls for personal transformation, urging individuals to cultivate a deeper relationship with God, seek his guidance, and live lives that reflect his values.
Okay.
It's like he believes individual transformation is a necessary prerequisite for national transformation. You can't have one without the other.
He also talks about generational thinking.
Yes.
About making decisions that benefit not just the present, but future generations as well.
Right.
What did you make of that?
I found that really interesting. He's challenging Ghanaians to think beyond immediate gratification and embrace a long-term vision, a commitment to building a legacy of prosperity and blessing that extends beyond their own lifetimes.
Right.
He's calling for a kind of stewardship mentality, recognizing that they're caretakers of a nation, a legacy that will be passed on to those who come after them.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
And really speaks to the idea of responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to future generations.
Exactly.
And it connects back to his emphasis on empowering youth, providing them with opportunities for education, employment, and spiritual growth.
Right.
He seems to see young people as key to breaking the cycles of poverty and hopelessness that can fuel instability and conflict.
He's placing a lot of hope in the younger generation, believing they have the potential to bring about lasting change. And he's not just talking about spiritual change.
Right.
He's also talking about practical things like creating jobs and ensuring basic needs are met.
Right.
It's a vision where spiritual and material progress go hand in hand.
And he doesn't just stop at economic and social progress.
Right.
He also prays for the protection of the nation's borders, its airways, its highways.
Wow.
It's like he has this comprehensive vision of security and well-being that extends to every aspect of national life.
It's a very holistic understanding of what it means for a nation to be secure and prosperous.
Yeah.
It's not just about military strength or economic indicators.
Right.
It's about the well-being of the people, their spiritual lives, their sense of unity, their ability to live in peace and harmony.
Wow. This has been a truly fascinating deep dive.
It has.
We've gone from spiritual warfare and territorial spirits to economic policy and the importance of unity.
Quite a journey.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
What are your final takeaways from exploring the Archbishop's perspective?
I think what strikes me most is the depth of his conviction and the passion with which he articulates his vision for Ghana. Whether or not you agree with everything he says, it's hard to deny the sincerity of his belief and his deep commitment to the well-being of his nation.
Yeah.
And I think he raises some really important questions about the relationship between faith and action, about the role of belief in shaping national destinies, and about the power of unity and collective purpose in overcoming challenges.
He certainly leaves us with a lot to think about.
He does.
And that final question he poses about whether the existence of this Prince of Ghana depends on people believing in it.
Right.
Or whether belief itself can be a force powerful enough to shape a nation's destiny. Well, that's something I'll be pondering for a while.
Me too.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. It's been an enlightening conversation.
My pleasure. It's always fascinating to explore these complex intersections of faith, politics, and national identity.